So, you know that time when you discover an Instagram site that you just can't let go of? I found that with Little Justice Leaders. I have fallen in love with this website because you know that I love to connect multicultural picture books to the work that we do in the classroom with STEM and STEAM. We are so fortunate to be able to talk today to Dr. Shelby Kretz and be able to learn more about this site, why it's more important than ever now, and how you can follow them and support their work. Shelby, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Diane.
I am so happy to be with you today. Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, your adventures in learning, and what sort of brought you here?
Absolutely. So I had kind of a traditional experience in education and learning, and um, got to really like have my mind opened by some amazing mentors and friends, and just guides along the way. And so a little bit about my background. I got my undergraduate degree in psychology at Ohio State. I went into after school programming after that, and then briefly in school counseling, and then ended up going back to UCLA to get my PhD in urban education. And that's where I really started to get interested in the work that I'm doing now around social justice in schools.
And can you talk a little bit more about how your account, your website came to be, and what your mission and focus is for those who
Yeah,
don't know it?
absolutely. So, for those who don't know, Little Justice Leaders helps families, educators, and schools develop a culture of social justice and talk to kids about topics of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and justice. And I got started with this work in 2018, so it's been about 7 years now. And the reason it came about was I was hearing from a lot of teachers that I was working with and just friends and parents in my community that they didn't know how to engage with young people in conversations about some of the political and social issues that they were hearing about. So we know our kids have more access to information than ever before. And in 2016, as everyone remembers, that was a time when there were a lot of very controversial issues being talked about in the media, a lot of narratives that hadn't been publicized as much before. And so many teachers and parents just had no idea how to navigate that terrain with young students. And that's when I thought, you know what, like my focus is on social justice and education. I've worked with young people, I've worked in curriculum design. Maybe I can do something that can help. And I actually started with the Instagram, and I just started posting, resources and content that I thought might be useful for families and for educators. And it's grown from there. And now we, serve schools, educators, and families and help by providing resources, support, and curriculum around justice topics.
And you've got a very diverse team that you work with as well. Can you talk about sort of how you surrounded yourself with people and how you all go about deciding what issues you want to talk about and how to present it so that it's usable? Because it's very user friendly.
Yeah, we try. So I appreciate that. It was very important to me very early on to make sure that we had a lot of voices in the space. We're talking about social justice. There are so many different issues and topics and identities that come into that. So we're thinking about, race, we're thinking about gender and gender identity, LGBTQ plus identities, immigration and refugee experiences, disabilities and neurodiversity. And nobody has expertise on every single topic and nobody has lived experience on every single topic. So we knew that meant like we're going to have to bring lots of folks in. And even, one person with a disability, for example, has one perspective, and that does not represent the perspectives of everybody with disabilities. So we knew like, okay, we really want to be able to bring in lots of different folks. So we actually started as a subscription box organization, and each month the box covered a different theme. And so what we started to do was bring in what we called our box leaders. And those were 3 to 5 different people who had expertise on that topic and lived experience on that topic. And so they were able to bring, this diversity of thought into every single topic we covered and into all of the curriculum that we've been creating over the past 7 years. So that's kind of how we've done that. And we connect with those folks like organically. We ask our community, we, reach out to people on Instagram or other platforms who we admire and just ask them if they'd like to be part of the work and the movement. And so that's kind of how it's grown and built. And over the years, we've worked with hundreds of experts in, different areas of education and activism. And so we've been very lucky in that sense. We think about making the resources, actionable for families by also pairing with education experts. So we have a lot of folks who know a lot about schooling and teaching and parenting, and they take all the content that we get from our, content leaders and make it kid friendly, right? And make it actionable so that it's not so scary and overbearing. We try to turn it into scripts, like here's exactly what you can say, or activities, like here's something, fun and interesting you can do that's also a learning experience, or just simple tips, like things to keep in mind. Education for the adult is important. So we try to like think about a mix, and a lot of it's just asking our community what they want, and then we've learned, over the years what they find most helpful and, what we can provide for them.
Well, and you said something that really resonated just a moment ago, where you talked about avoiding the single story.
Yeah.
Because as you're right, we all have different experiences, and no one person represents a particular culture or experience. And I've been drawn to that when you make your book recommendations, for example.
Mhm.
And like this past month has been Disability Pride.
Mhm.
And there were so many different books that were represented and suggested throughout that it really made it easy for a family to dive in and be able to start exploring. And I just wanted to bring up, I think that's super important. I'm wondering, what's the process for sort of how you vet the books and bring in books to show windows and mirrors for kids?
Yeah, good question. So we try to think, as much as possible, like challenge ourselves, to like just deepen our sense of diversity, right? I think generally in our culture, we think of like representation in children's books. We hear a lot about this, and we know it's really important. And like many, families and teachers will maybe, get a couple of books that feature, protagonists of color, and then that's it, right? And that's the extent of the representation. What we're constantly asking ourselves is like, how can we dig deeper? Like, how can we do more? How can we push to different topics, different identities that aren't represented? So, and that goes within each, topic too. So when we're thinking about disability pride, we don't want to recommend 10 books that feature a character in a wheelchair because there's so much diversity within disabilities. And so we want to think about, okay, how can we make sure that like as many different disabilities, as many different perspectives on disabilities, some of them are going to be activism related. So let's learn about like the history of activism around disabilities and like fighting for change. But some of them are just kids with disabilities living their lives, like having joy, having, freedom, doing whatever it is that they want to do, representing like just normal kids, because it doesn't always have to be about activism and change making, right? We have young people with disabilities, going with this example, who are just living their lives, and they deserve to see themselves represented in books, just living their lives too, right? Like not fighting for justice, not fighting for inclusion, just being. And so we try to think about kind of all of those different things, and it's always a push for us, and our community calls us in, and our community says like, hey, what about this? What about that? Can you do this? Can you do that? Our community is amazing and kind and forgiving with us over the years, and willing to educate us and willing to support us. And that allows us to have hundreds and thousands of people who are holding us accountable and telling us perspectives that we're missing, which I think is really important because no one can be an expert on all of these things.
So I want to go there for just a second because you said something that strikes me as being really important for how we live in this country today.
Mhm.
It's no secret that we're incredibly divided as a country in terms of perspectives. And it feels like a lot of that is manufactured, that maybe if we get down deep into it, we have more in common than we think we do. How do you navigate that line of being open and incredibly open to being called in and to learning from others, without letting your ego get in the way, to be willing to say, oops, I messed that up, and or I didn't know that, and now I do, and I can do better. So, what's gone into that for you? Because I think that's
Yeah.
something we all need to learn to do a little bit better.
Absolutely. I think it's so important. I think there's a few things, right? I mean, our our egos can be hurt sometimes, right? Getting called in, called out, being told we didn't do something in the right way, like it stings for a minute. So sometimes just like let that sting for a minute. Like just feel it. It's okay. Take a breath. We don't respond right away, right? And then it's, being grateful, like, oh, I can be better at this work because folks are willing to share and to give me this feedback. But I think for me, the most important thing that we've done at Little Justice Leaders is cultivating a community of people who care about us, right? And are kind to us and can do this in a kind way, right? Because there's ways to call folks out, and sometimes these tactics are needed, but sometimes it can really shut people down. It can make people not want to be involved in the work if they feel attacked and just like really um I guess, yeah, just attacked for what they're trying to do and for a mistake that they've made. So we try to engage with people in a way that is open, honest. Like we communicate, we show gratitude, we are try to bring humanity to like online interactions, which I think can be very much missing, right? So even if, someone posts a comment that is not particularly kind in its approach, we're still human, but we try to be kind, be thoughtful, be open in our response. And almost always that shifts the tone of the conversation. And that person comes back in and is like, oh, I'm sorry I came off this way. Like so many of us are on edge, right? We're on edge with our online communication. And when we bring this like humanity, like, oh yes, I'm only human, like I'm doing my best. We're trying, like, I didn't know that, whatever it might be. Um, it shifts the narrative. And I think we've just created a space where that is the norm of like just kindness, gentleness, accountability, absolutely. But with a gentleness that is like respect and appreciation for each other.
I love that. A lot of what I've been doing with teachers, my work has shifted a little bit
Mhm.
as the world has shifted,
Yeah.
and trying to help connect these very important books with science and STEM.
Mhm.
But more importantly, I'm realizing it's not so much connecting it content wise, it's helping teachers find ways to allow kids to learn through play, to develop that empathy that they need to be able to be collaborative, creative problem solvers.
Mhm.
And that means letting go of old ways of doing things, which can be really, really hard for people.
Mhm.
How do you all, because I've noticed there's a strong thread of sort of empathy and playfulness in the way that you do this. I'm assuming it's intentional, but can you go a little bit deeper into how you do that?
Yeah. So it's definitely intentional. So I'm really glad that it comes through. We tackle really difficult topics, really hard charged topics. And we're an organization that exists for kids. So for us, like playfulness, curiosity, those are like the building blocks of why we're here. Um, Thinking like from a child lens in a way, which I think many of us could benefit from just bringing that to our work in general. When it comes to empathy and critical thinking are two of our core kind of pillars and beliefs around social justice education. We think that social teaching kids about social justice fosters empathy and kindness and humanity, which I think most of us want for our young people. And because they get to learn about stories and people who are different from them and build their own opinions and ideas around about the world around them in a very real way. And it fosters critical thinking because it encourages us to think about what kind of world do we want to live in? How is this fair? Is this right? What does fair mean? What does this all mean? And age appropriate ways, right? And so it's just a matter of like centering that in all the content we create, constantly coming back to like, how can we foster empathy? How can we like root this in storytelling? Stories are such a way that young people learn, all people learn. And so like how do we root this in story? How do we make this a little bit fun? Like it doesn't need to be heavy and sad all the time. So yeah, just kind of like keeping those things in mind.
I like that. So, as you guys are sort of planning out your content,
Mhm.
I assume you probably have like a year sort of planned it out by the year, but then current events happen.
Yeah.
And how does that look when something happens that you go, ooh, we really do need to respond to that right now?
Yeah. This is something we're still figuring out. I think probably that's the case for like a lot of folks who create content. We have things planned in advance, and when something happens, the team will just get together and be like, "Hey, should we create something about this? Like, here's what we're thinking." We brainstorm out some ideas. We have some folks we really trust that we can quickly go to have them review. We're always trying to balance, like, we want to get content out fast. We want it to be useful. And for it to be useful, it needs to be there when people need it, right? And we don't want to move so fast that we lose our intentionality. And so for us, it's a back and forth of like, okay, let's make this fast. We get all of our team to weigh in on it. We have some trusted folks that we can go to for quick reviews. And then we just get it out. Like, so, it's really, it really is that simple of a process. And we're refining it though, because sometimes we end up, days or a week later than it should be because people have real lives and we don't want to rush things out if folks haven't had time to look at them and think about it and reflect on it. So yeah, it's a process. We're figuring it out. Hopefully we will continue to get better at that, especially as we have more and more breaking news that is, things that kids are hearing about.
Well, and that was going to be sort of my next question. You've been doing this since 2018 in
Yeah.
this format. How has it gotten easier? How has it gotten more challenging?
Yeah. It's definitely gotten, I will say, easier in the sense that like we have some systems now, we have some processes, right? When I started in 2018, it was me and Instagram and just whatever I could think of in my mind, and I was putting it on there, right? Now we have calendars and we have a team and we have content creators, we have scripts and like video editors and all of those things that make the work easier. Um, I think our current political climate makes things um, in many ways more difficult because we have always adhered to this like belief of drawing people in and being a space where like justice is made accessible and made open for everyone who may be curious, no matter what your backgrounds and beliefs may have been or may be or may be evolving to be. And so, trying to find the line of we stand where we stand and we have very strong beliefs on a lot of things. And we want this to be a space that's open for folks. We want this to be a space where people can, dip their toe in. Like maybe they've not had the best experiences in social justice spaces, which I think is the case for a lot of people. And we want this to be a space where they can step into and be willing to learn, be willing to be called in because they feel emotionally safe. So walking that line, but also, we don't want to be soft, quote unquote soft on the issues that really matter, right? And so at some point we draw a line in the sand on like this is what we believe, this is where we stand, and we want to be a space where people can learn and explore and ask questions and be curious without shame.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense to me. So let's say that somebody isn't familiar with your work
Yeah.
and they're feeling overwhelmed by the news and all the stuff that's going on. Where would you tell them to start?
Yeah. So I would definitely say, I mean, for resources, of course, like come to our Instagram, come to find our work. But if you're feeling overwhelmed, I think a few things like taking a break. Like sometimes, like we're human, like we've never had this much access to information and news before in our lives. It is okay to take a break. It can feel like unethical in ways to take a break. So I want to acknowledge that. Like it can feel like we shouldn't deserve a break because there's so many terrible things happening in the world and so many people who have it, you know, a million times worse than we do. And still, like, we cannot move forward. We cannot make progress. We cannot make this world better if we are drained. And that's part of the point. That's the intentionality of this constant stream of news. It's intended to keep us feeling hopeless and feeling overwhelmed and feeling powerless. And so we can't let that happen. So take a break, take care of yourself, like do what you need to do, whether that's meditation, going on a walk, getting outside, having a snack, like whatever it is, and come back to it with fresh eyes, and or set boundaries so you're not like always, always, always coming back to it. Because I think there is this very intentional effort for us to become overwhelmed and to feel powerless. If you're looking for resources for kids, like we have like these very, or for engaging with kids or even for adults, to be honest, we do have very intentional resources and guidance and support. But I think sometimes what we really need is just to close the phone, like close the computer and step away from all of it.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And then once you've stepped away, you've found yourself again. Come back and check out the things that you have with Little Justice Leaders, because as you just said, yes, it's geared for kids, but for adults out there as well, it's a really comfortable way to begin your learning process.
Absolutely. We try to make it easy. So many people will tell us, like, we actually just use your resources for adults, or I learn more from this than my kids do. And I love those comments because, when it comes to justice, we're all beginners. And so starting from square one makes sense for a lot of us.
So I want to finish with a question that I like to ask everybody. And given the current political climate, it's an even more important question than ever, I think.
Yeah.
What brings you hope?
Kids bring me hope. Seeing young people who care about making better, who care about their community. And, sometimes that might just be being kind to the people around them, being kind to other students in their class, doing acts of service around their community, being in community with each other, and like just spending time together and having meeting and gathering spaces. Like young people are transforming our culture in so many ways, and thinking deeply about what does it mean to live in a society that's just and equitable and where people feel a sense of belonging. And as much as there is like so much terrifying and devastating news and events happening in the world, I think always when you look to young people, like it can be this beacon of hope for like what is to come and what can change.
I love that. Well, Shelby, thank you so much for joining us on the Adventures in Learning podcast. I will drop links to your website and to the Instagram account in the show notes. And I encourage everybody to check out Little Justice Leaders.
Thank you so much for having me, Diane.